Well, I want to welcome to the program Danielle Bean. Danielle, thank you for taking time to be with me today.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Danielle, you have to give my wife a birthday gift, okay? So she's a
Okay.
big fan of yours, all the way back to your blog and
Oh
to
my gosh.
Omnipotent, and yeah, a long
Oh
time ago.
man.
All
An
right.
OG fan. I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. What's your wife's name?
My wife's name is Carrie, and her birthday is the day this program's airing. And I've been
Oh my
struggling to
gosh.
find a birthday gift for her. Okay. Now,
Perfect.
I know. So you're going to give her a big shout out. Actually, I want some guidance here, and I bet a lot of other men want guidance as well, because you've been married to your husband 28 years.
Yes, 28 years.
28 years, blessed with 8 children, and my wife and I 28 years, and
Hmm.
blessed with 9 children, and um, still trying to figure stuff out, right? And one of the things
Yeah, for sure.
I'm trying to figure out is, what do I get for a wife of 28 years and a mother of many? So give me some
Right.
guidance here, okay?
Yeah, I think she probably needs a break. So, Carrie, happy birthday. I'm going to tell your husband to give you a break. Look for a way to do that, like something that she enjoys, and just make the space for her to enjoy it, even if it's all by herself, reading a book, or watching a show that she loves, or spending time with a good girlfriend, or spending time alone with you. Like, think about what really rejuvenates her and give her the space to do that. I mean, I think that that's what every woman really wants is the most thoughtful gift, is to think about a way to allow them that time to truly recreate, right? Recreate. This is something that we have difficulty doing as women, is making the space and time for that. So such a gift if a thoughtful spouse like you steps in and makes it happen and arranges for that to happen on her birthday. I think that's a great plan.
Okay, so I'm going to flex here because today, as I'm talking to you, it's a school day,
Yeah.
but my wife and the kiddos that are still at home, they abandoned school and they went skiing. Okay,
Oh,
so
how
all
fun.
right, don't tell anybody. Okay, don't tell anybody that we took a skip day. And my
Oh
wife
my
is
gosh.
like, the snow is so great, we have to go skiing today. And I'm like, all right, fine. So,
I think that's great. I'm a big fan of those skip days. Being a homeschooler most of my life, some of my kids transitioned into our local public high school later on, and I always had the hardest time wrapping my brain around, like, what, you don't have to go to school. Like, we have plans, like. So I was like the biggest fan of skip days as a mom. And in fact, one of my sons, he had a great GPA. It didn't affect his grades at all, but he missed the maximum number of days you can miss in his senior year and still graduate. And so I
I
was like,
love
all
that.
right, we
I
maxed out
think
the fun time as a family.
that is so cool. We get called into the office for a meeting if we have too many tardies or absences. So, oh goodness. Well, Danielle, thank you for that. Folks, if you're not familiar with Danielle Bean, you ought to be. And you see up on the screen, Danielle Bean is so many things. She's an author and a writer, and she has an amazing podcast called Girlfriends. And I got to tell you, your podcast, you are like a machine gun. Like with the amount of content you get out there, it's amazing. You put out there amazing, like practical things. It's like, here's the list of 8 things to do, like last minute ideas for Lent right here, right? You had
Mhm.
a goal setting one at the beginning of the year. You have this one on Lent, so many things. And we're going to come back to the sites. Again, it's daniellebean.com. We'll come back to some of these other sites to give our folks more insight into you. First, I want to say this, like, you're supremely busy in the things that you're doing as a wife and a mother, and yet you do so many things, like the TV show and the podcast. Oh yeah, and by the way, the books. And how do you do it? All right.
Yeah, I love that question. I get it a lot. And I think every woman should get asked that question, because every woman is doing so many things. I have such respect for hardworking, busy women of all walks of life, and men too, of course. But I think that the thing is, I've just always, for better or for worse, I've had a lot of energy, and I need an output for it. So, but doing things like the podcast, or writing books, or looking for creative outlets like that has always just been a part of how I'm built, how God made me. So I look for ways to use that in a way that can, I hopefully, encourage other people and to help build up the church. And all of that said, I don't do all the things, I don't like, and I don't do them all at once, for sure. And my husband, Dan, is an amazing support to me. So I couldn't be doing these things without him, without his boots on the ground support here at home,
No, Danielle,
especially during.
I'm going to tell you, when you said your husband Dan's an amazing support to you, you were doing this. My husband Dan is an amazing support to me. I got it on video. So,
Oh,
folks,
don't show it to
she was
Dan. Don't
actually
show it to Dan.
shaking
No,
her
I mean
head.
it.
She wasn't nodding. My husband Dan is an amazing.
Yeah.
She was shaking her head. I don't know. There's
I'm
just
shaking my
subtle
head at how
things.
awesome he is,
There we
and
go.
yeah, how truly supportive he is. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it really is true, right? I think
Yeah.
so many times women will come to me and they'll say, like, "How do you do all these things?" And they're comparing like whatever they've got on their plate with what
Right.
I'm showing on the outside, and that's not a fair game. Like, keep your eyes on your own paper. Like, what is God calling you to do? What unique circumstances and gifts and opportunities has he given to you? Focus there and focus on that. So that's what I've aimed to do. And sometimes I've messed it up. I've taken on too many things. And then other times I feel like I'm ready for more. And so I'm always kind of seeking that balance in what I do.
So, one of the things I'll say to parents who say to me, "Oh, I only have 2 kids. And how do you do it with that many?" And I say, well, no, any kid is going to fill your life to overflowing, right? Any child,
Right.
with the time,
Absolutely.
attention, love, energy, care, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you have a particular mission, and yours is to women and oftentimes mothers, helping them get a sense of their dignity, helping them when they feel overwhelmed, when they see the shortcomings and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that's your mission? Here's what I mean. I have a sense that, and I think this is Catholic, that God has created us for a purpose, right? And
Right.
one way to express that purpose is a sense of feeling a dedication to accomplish a particular mission in a particular way. And it feels like you were made, the Lord made you for this moment to be a voice to women, Catholic women, women of faith, to help them face struggles that can really hold them back from experiencing the joy God has for them. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. That is a very good way to put it. I appreciate that. Because I that's really what I've felt called to do. I've always just said I've got a heart for moms who struggle, a simple way of putting it. And what that looks like often in the church is exactly what you just described. And just really needing that encouragement to know who you are and who God made you to be and the awesome gifts he's given you. And, learning not to compare ourselves to other people and these other things that are a threat to our joy. And I feel like God has given me a unique capacity for reaching women on that level, and I'm grateful for it. And part of it, truthfully, it stems from my own need for it. I can look back on my early motherhood and some of the ways that I truly struggled and some of the ways that I struggle at the stage of life that I'm in right now. And I look for ways that I can connect with other women through those weaknesses, through those struggles. And we can, there's a unique sense of encouragement that we can get when we come together as a community, seeking to affirm those gifts we have and affirm our value as women, and just looking to build each other up in those vocations that God has called us to.
I'd say I'm talking with Danielle Bean, folks. If you're listening to this, I do encourage you to go watch the video version of this as well. And DanielleBean.com will be coming back to show more of what she does as not only a wife and a mother, but as a blogger, podcaster, TV show host, writer, etc. So Danielle, COVID happened, and COVID shook a lot of people loose from their sense of connecting to the regular practice of their faith. I'd love to get your sense about how this impacted really wives and mothers, and even just the wider community and in your sphere, when it came to the practice of their Catholic faith, with kids all of a sudden being at home, stuck at home, and then all of a sudden not being able to access the sacraments or the regular practice of the faith. What's your sort of overarching, now that we're mostly free from this stuff, what's your overarching sense of what happened there, and any insight you have?
Yeah, I mean, this is something, of course, we've all given a lot of thought to, and I've talked about a lot of different ways. But ultimately, my takeaway is, I look around at my local parish now, and the pews are emptier than they've ever been. Okay, for sure. At the start of coming back to mass, they were a little emptier, but we have not made a full comeback as a church, and that's sad. I think there's a real opportunity for leadership there, from our all the way from our pastor all the way up to our bishops at the diocese level, to really encourage people to come back and to really send the message that we need this in-person connection with our Lord. Like, we need to be present for Mass, right? We need to be present to receive the sacraments. I think that there's a real learning opportunity here. And in large ways, it's being missed from the pulpit, at least around where I live. So I think there's an opportunity for lay people to step up and beginning with your own family, with your own children, make sure you're catechizing them and making sure they know that our physical presence matters and that you have to be physically present. There's a physical aspect of every one of the sacraments. I've always loved this about our faith, that it takes into account our physical presence, who we are as physical beings, and our senses matter. And so teaching that to our kids first and foremost, but then being leaders in our faith communities and bringing forth this message, and maybe even bringing it to your pastor. It's been on my mind, and I guess my pastor probably won't be watching this. But something I'd like to say is, oh my gosh, stop doing like a spiritual communion after communion for people who are watching on the television. Like, they can do their own spiritual communion. It's nothing but confusing to the people in the pews. Like, I feel like we've fallen into these habits from COVID that kind of holds us back from an authentic, full experience of the Mass. And even though we've gone back in many ways, like you said, back to quote unquote normal in many ways, I'm not sure we're ever going to be back to what we were before. And that's a little discouraging to see, but I try to see in it an opportunity, an invitation to step up as lay people. We have the opportunity to step up as leaders in our communities, but that begins first and foremost in your domestic church, in the walls of your home with your own family.
Yeah, so I want to go in a couple of directions here. The first is you talk about that idea of stepping up in our own home. And I want to say that a lot of folks I've talked to have narrowed their focus of concern to their own families, because so many, and you probably encounter this regularly, so many folks that are our age, and now they have kids that are young adults. They spent all these years forming them in the Catholic faith and sending them off to Catholic places or homeschooling them, Catholic schools and even Catholic colleges. And then, the story. What's the next line I'm going to say? They stopped practicing their faith. They left the church. They got married outside the church. The kid's not baptized, and they're suffering. They're suffering, and they're saying, what did I do wrong, or what happened? And now you have this next wave of folks saying, I don't want this to happen to the rest of my kids. Right. So I don't know what your experience has been like, because your kids span, like my kids are 10 to 23, and I think your kids are a little ahead of mine.
They're a little ahead. Yep. So mine are 16 to 28.
So you're going to help me figure out what happens in the next 5 years. Okay. So how has that worked out for you in terms of your kids and the practice of the faith, and any steps that you took or would recommend to help kids in growing kids not to lose their faith?
So I think it's important to really speak to that. What you just talked about is a very common experience. I hear from people all the time about it. Thus far, we have been blessed that all of our kids are still practicing their faith. That's not to say we've been perfect about it. I know. Not to say it's been easy, not to say there haven't been moments where I was like, oh my gosh, like this one's going off the rails, but so we're very blessed in that way, but I don't take that for granted. And I don't think that's any particular thing where I can be like, oh, look what we accomplished here. Like, look what the Lord is doing in the lives of my children is what, the way I look at it. And but I would say that in some of those rough moments that every parent experiences through teenage or young adult years, that I have kind of come to learn that to kind of take the long view of it. And I'm not there yet, right? So I've got 4 who are married to wonderful, faithful Catholic people. Like, I do not take these blessings for granted. Like, it's a beautiful gift.
I want to know, how did you arrange that? Was it like highly assisted? I mean, was it just a novena? I mean, like, how do you get that to happen?
Well, from the time they were babies, I've prayed for my children's spouses. So anybody out there who's got little kids, pray for your children's future spouses. And then what a gift it was to like meet these people. I'm like, I've been praying for you my whole life. Like, what an amazing thing. But that said, I really want to underscore the importance of a Catholic college education. So a lot of our kids have gone to Ave Maria University. Some have gone to places closer to home. And one daughter in particular commuted to a local state school. So there are different ways of getting your college education if your kids are going to go to college. But I really want to encourage parents to consider a faithful Catholic community college, like not community college. It could be community college, but a faithful Catholic college where there's going to be a community of young people, because honestly, like, these are formative years, and these are the years where your children are likely to meet their future spouse. Shouldn't they be surrounded by faithful practicing Catholics? Isn't that the recipe for what you want for the trajectory for the rest of their lives? So we really have encouraged that first and foremost. But in some of those rougher moments, I've kind of learned to take the longer view and to see, like, when I first ever had teenagers and I was like, what on earth? Like, what this child I've poured my life into is rejecting me in every possible painful way. And yet I now have a little bit more perspective, and I can see, this is something they need to go through sometimes. And really, my husband and I both have tried to foster a sense of openness to their questions, foster a sense of discussion, not to shame them if they're confused or struggling with something with regard to the faith. Just, we want that openness to be part of our family culture. I was blessed to be raised in a family myself of 9 kids, with a similar culture where my parents weren't afraid of questions, because you know what? The church isn't afraid of questions. God isn't afraid of questions. We have access to the truth. And I think that ultimately is the greatest gift we can give any of our kids, is that there is a truth and we can know it. Let's find it out together. Let's go on this path together. So that sense of openness to your children's questions and even their doubts, even if you're terrified on the inside, like really maintaining that sense of openness to it and encouraging their questions so that they can really come into their own with regard to their faith.
That's beautiful, Danielle. And as you think about this, I'm going to tie it to the second question I had, and that was, you see diminishing communities. And so we'd love to have our kids, when they go to Mass, be around a bunch of other kids that are also fervent about their faith and faithful
Right.
Catholic families, all of that. So you're familiar with the Benedict option, right? So you see in a number of places around the country, people are starting to move to be near other intentional Catholic families. Do you have any insight into that? Like your sense about that? Because a lot of people do it for the liturgy. They want to have more reverent liturgy. And
Sure.
that's where maybe the traditional Latin Mass comes in, or other
Yeah.
places that tend to be centers of faith. Like you hear Matt Fradd talk about happening at Franciscan University in Steubenville. I'm living in, we moved to be in a community that is, loosely speaking, more of like a Benedict option, and that's sort of Spokane to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. If you haven't been here, we need to
I
have you come
haven't.
out and see it. It's
I would love it.
amazing what God is doing here. But what's your own take on this concept of the Benedict option as a resource or as a means of helping families foster and raise their kids in faith?
Yeah, I think it absolutely can be a wonderful tool for families. It can be a wonderful option for families that will approach, intentionally seeking out community for their families in that way. But that said, I would say every family, every person has their own unique vocation, but I believe every family has their own unique vocation and a unique calling. And part of it is like just determining what that is. Like, what's your charism as a family? What's your mission as a family? That might mean going and being part of an intentional community in that way. But it might mean more of a living in the world and being a living, breathing witness in the world to your faith. And for us, like, that kind of community really wasn't an option with regard to our life circumstances. So we didn't have access to that. And we live here, in central New Hampshire on 10 acres adjacent to like a wildlife refuge. So it's like space and space and space out there. So we're pretty isolated here, and there's not a lot of Catholic community. I think we're the only large family for miles around. And yet we've kind of carved out our own existence here in a way that I really believe God had planned for us all along, so we did homeschool, and we were involved in some different organized homeschool things, but even that it's a trek to get there. Like, it wasn't right next door. So figuring out a lot of things on our own, kind of like a homesteading approach to Catholic family life and formation. And that's really worked well for us. There has come a point in a lot of my kids' lives, maybe as they're becoming teenagers, where they kind of struggled a bit and like, I want more in my life. Like, I want more community. And then we would be intentional about seeking that out for each child. Sometimes it meant joining a local youth group or being a part of other things going on in our community or with our parish, just being, sensitive to that as parents. But ultimately, I think that our family lifestyle has been much more isolated and not part of a community like that. But also the flip side of that is also being engaged in our community, being the only one with the clown car, the van that all the kids come spilling out. And like, sometimes it's made me terribly uncomfortable through the years. And yet I see that God had a plan for us in that we're kind of, the light, the city on a hill, and the salt of the earth, and this light. We don't necessarily want to be that. It feels uncomfortable sometimes, right? I don't want to be this light shining forth. And yet that's what the gospel tells tells us we're called to
Hold
be.
on. You don't feel comfortable being the light? Wait a minute. Now, is it the TV program that makes you uncomfortable? Is it the podcast that makes you feel uncomfortable? Is it the
Hey,
books
you're
that
gonna
you read?
die when you hear
Come
this,
on
and you're not
now.
gonna believe me. No,
what do you,
I'm an introverted person. Like, this
oh,
is 100% true. I'm an introvert who plays a good extrovert
that is
when I
funny.
need to. So I think everybody's like that. Like, we have our own temperaments and our own inclinations, and we can work with them. God can work with them, and we can get outside our comfort zone sometimes to do something that we know God is calling us to do. So
Okay,
yeah,
here's
I'll
a
do a
question.
weekend like I'm going to out in Montana, and I'll need to collapse at the end of it and totally, recharge afterwards.
That is really funny because I'm actually an introvert too. Maybe that's why I prefer radio.
See, look at you.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. But okay, so you mentioned everyone has their own temperaments. So my wife and I said none of our kids are married yet, right? But they're all like in the midst of the older four and vocation and all this kind of thing and figuring it out. And we have this plan that any suitor that's going to come, our four oldest are girls. They're going to take a personality profile test. Have you ever done anything like that? Have you ever done anything to try to figure out, are these two a good match? Because sometimes they don't have the best insight into,
Hmm.
are they a good fit or not? Because we
Right.
have like several that we'd like throw at them, make them sit down and take. So
That's very interesting. I like that approach. I've never been that scientific about it. I just kind of go with my intuition a little bit. And but you're right that kids need guidance in this. We had a rule here in our family because my husband Dan and I met in high school and we dated in high school and we had no business dating. Like, we were not prepared for that. And so now we have a rule that our kids don't date in high school. And they are always throwing that in our faces, like, but you guys met in high school. And it's been a battle at times. But I just don't feel like kids have the emotional or spiritual maturity to handle that kind of intense emotion at a young age. And so we've kind of tried to guide them through that. And there have been some missteps along the way. There have been some teenage rebellions along the way and all of that. And yet I think it's just whether you give them a test or not, I think it's kind of setting standards and speaking to them what your values are. And this is something we've been very intentional about, like telling our kids from the time they were small, like, it's really important that you find a good Catholic person to marry, and having that be part of our family's culture. And not if one of our kids, chose to date or marry someone outside of the faith, like, we wouldn't reject that person, but we want to set them up for their greatest chance of happiness and holiness in this life, and then being together, in happiness forever in the next life. And so this is how we do it, right? You need to have those values, and kids don't always see that. So, kind of imparting those values to them and having conversations with them about it, and being the kind of open parent enough so that they feel comfortable coming to you when they have questions, or when they or sometimes they're never going to come to you with the question they have, making sure there are other adults in their lives that they do feel comfortable with, that they can ask questions to. We have a youth minister here at our local parish. His name is Seth, and I like to call him our third parent because I trust him, and our kids have known him through the years. He's been such a blessing to our family because they can go to him with things. And, whether it's earth shattering or not, it feels like it to them in the moment. And they're not always going to be comfortable coming to mom or dad. So really having people in your kids' lives like that is important too.
Well, Danielle, you make a great point. Again, I'm talking to Danielle Bean. I really encourage you to go to her website, daniellebean.com, where you can learn about so much about what she's doing. And I would encourage you to pick up her new book, Whisper, Finding God in Your Everyday Life. And it's listening in the moments, not necessarily taking from prayer, but listening to God in the little moments that happen day to day. It's a wonderfully reviewed on Amazon. You can get a link to it right here. That book came out last year, and I know you're doing many, many other things, but you said something, Danielle, that really struck me. And that was that be open to receiving questions and engaging those questions, but then also have trusted people in your life that can also complement that. I'm going to guess that there are a lot of folks like watching or listening to this interview, and they're like, I don't have that like capacity. I wasn't equipped. I didn't grow up in an environment where I'm comfortable with awkward, intimate conversations. And so one of the things that I've seen some people do, and sometimes my wife and I will recommend, is, there are wonderful resources out there on video and audio and books where you can have your kids like face these questions in a way that is more comfortable to you, and then you can kind of watch with them and that sort of thing. Have you seen that, or seen that be effective as well for parents who maybe aren't quite as capable to have these kind of really minefield type conversations.
Sure, sure. Yeah, there are lots of different resources out there. I would say if you're struggling with that, like look for something that's going to speak to you in the way that makes sense to you. Like I said, every family is different and they have their different kind of charism. And so you know the things that God's given to you, then you know the communication skills you have or the connection or the relationship you have with your child or your natural temperament or inclinations and the way that you click with your children. And that's not a mistake. None of that's a mistake, right? So God knows all about it. And he still made you the parent of that child. And so that's for a unique purpose. So you are the best parent for your child. So know that and be encouraged by that. And if you feel like there's some need that your child has that you're not able to fill, then help them to seek out the resource that they're going to need to do that. And I mean, we're so lucky to be living in the age that we are today. For good or for bad, the internet will put you in touch with anything and anyone, right? So look for those good resources and look for, you know, podcasts or books or video series or something along those lines that you can share with your kids. And sometimes those will just be a starter, you know, a starter to a conversation, a larger conversation that you might have with your children, but you can kind of set it up by sharing some form of media or reading something together in the first place.
Nice. Danielle, in the last couple of minutes, we have two quick questions for you. Okay. The first is, what's next? What are you doing next? I want to hear, come on now, give us a little insight. Is there another book coming out? Is there another TV series coming? Are you in a movie? Are you producing a, come on,
I'd
what's
love
next,
that.
Danielle?
Call me. I want to be in a movie.
Yeah.
No. So yeah, I'm working on, well, I've been very focused in the last 6 months, specifically on my community, my online community, girlfriendscommunity.com, which is an intentional online community. Like you're talking about, that's happening in real life with people. This is happening online where women are coming together uniquely for the purpose of encouraging and supporting each other in faith and family living and in a way that nobody else can do it. So I love what's going on there. It's growing incrementally, slowly, day by day, and I'm so grateful for the women that are present there and the real friendships that are growing there. Also, behind the scenes, I'm working on something. I can't share details just yet, but I'm working on a larger project that's going to be bringing together a lot of different media. So exactly the kind of resources you're talking about, looking for parents, for kids, for our own faith formation. I'm working on partnering together with a couple of different places and putting together kind of a house where we can hold all of these things together in common. So podcasts, books, video series, articles online, all of these things. So I'm going to be part of a larger project in that way. And I'm really excited about what the future holds for that.
Wow, that's exciting. Just another kind of tiny, small thing. Yeah.
Just another little thing I'm going to be doing. Yes.
All right. Now, last question. And this has to do with the fact that we're meeting in part because of conference speaking. And so you're speaking at a conference in Helena, Montana in the middle of April. And talk with me and address the women and just say, why is it important for moms and for women to come together at an event like that? You talked about the importance of physical presence right now. Just in the last minute, just tell us, like, why would it be important to come to an event like this and be able to fellowship with you and many others?
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to events like this, there's a lot we can learn from Our Lady. And I always look to her example in the Visitation, which such a beautiful lesson for us, where Mary goes, she hears this news from the angel Gabriel, which is like earth-shattering news, right? Like, you're going to become the mother of God. And we might understand if she took a minute to kind of process that, but Our Lady didn't. She went, the scripture tells us, with haste to her cousin Elizabeth, who was in need because she had learned that she was pregnant. And that's what we're all called to do as women. Go to one another in haste, meet one another's needs, and have your own needs met, you know, and that happens in person, in real life connection. What a beautiful, joyful moment that Visitation is. But what beauty and joy awaits you when you make the time to go away, spend time deliberately connecting with your sisters in Christ and gaining from them, sharing experiences, sharing stories, sharing laughter, sharing tears. There's so much to be gained when women come together uniquely for the purpose of encouraging and supporting one another. So I absolutely think it is absolutely worth making the time to do. Get it on your schedule, make the time for it, get the babysitter if you have to. There's no excuse for not doing this one thing for yourself, because ultimately it's a gift to your family, because you're going to come away renewed in your vocation and truly encouraged about the person who God has made you to be.
That's beautiful, Danielle. I love that. And I just say amen. Having been at many conferences, I agree. DanielleBean.com is also where you can invite Danielle to come and speak at your conference. I hope that you'll be able to do that. Danielle, thank you for taking as much time as you have with me today.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy talking with you.